This is the biggest geopolitical fracture in the Gulf since the Iran war began. The United Arab Emirates is leaving OPEC, and that single move tells you something much bigger is happening beneath the surface. The Gulf is no longer aligned. Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, long seen as strategic partners, are now moving in fundamentally different directions on security, economics, energy, and even who they trust. This isn't just an OPEC story. This is the early stage of a regional realignment with global consequences. The split didn't come out of nowhere. Saudi Arabia and the Emirates have been drifting apart for years, competing for influence across the region. They have been backing opposing factions in conflicts and increasingly clashing on priorities. But things escalated fast. Late last year, the Emirates believed that Mohammed bin Salman lobbied Donald Trump to impose sanctions on them over their support for Sudan's rapid support forces. The Saudis deny it, but the Emiratis claim Trump told them directly. Days later, Emirates-backed forces in southern Yemen launched an offensive. Then came the turning point, a Saudi airstrike on an Emirati weapons convoy in Yemen. That's unprecedented. Direct military action between nominal allies. Riyadh demanded a full Emirati withdrawal. The Emirates' main proxy force was dissolved. The relationship never recovered. Now the Iran war has taken those underlying fractures and made them urgent. At the core of this split are two completely different national strategies. Saudi Arabia is building inward. Vision 2030 is one of the most ambitious domestic transformations anywhere in the world. They are diversifying the economy, building infrastructure and creating jobs. Their sovereign wealth strategy reflects that. They want capital flowing into Saudi Arabia. They also have structural resilience, population, land, and infrastructure that allow them to function even under extreme disruption, including a shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz. The Emirates is the opposite. It's not a traditional regional power. It's a global hub. Out of 10 million people, about 9 million are expatriates. Its economy depends on openness, connectivity, and being a neutral platform for global business. Think Singapore in the Middle East. That works incredibly well until the neighborhood becomes unstable. Because if the region becomes hostile, the Emirates risks losing the very things its model depends on: talent, capital, and its role as a global connector. The divergence becomes even sharper when you look at geopolitics. The Emirates led the Abraham Accords, normalizing relations with Israel. The assumption back then was that Saudi Arabia would eventually follow. That's no longer true. Saudi Arabia has pulled back, publicly condemning Israel's actions in Gaza, with Mohammed bin Salman calling them genocide. Meanwhile, the Emirates has drawn the opposite conclusion from the Iran war, that Israel is the most reliable partner in the region. That leads directly into their Iran strategies. The Emirates sees Iran, especially its military and nuclear capabilities, as an existential threat. Their approach is increasingly aligned with Israel: contain, monitor, and, if necessary, act preemptively. Saudi Arabia is taking a different path. They believe they can coexist with Iran. Their priority is stability, negotiating a long-term arrangement that reduces the risk of direct or proxy attacks. And notably, they're looking to countries like China and Pakistan to help facilitate that balance. Let's explore the oil break. Now we get to OPEC, and why the Emirates leaving is such a big deal. For Saudi Arabia, oil remains central. They have high fiscal needs, massive reserves, and still control some of the cheapest barrels globally. OPEC Plus is a core tool for managing prices and maintaining that position. The Emirates sees the future differently. Once the strait reopens, they have about 1 million barrels per day of spare capacity, and plans to reach 5 million by 2027. Leaving OPEC lets them produce freely. In a high-price environment, that's a huge advantage. But it's also about the long term. The Emirates is actively preparing for a post-oil world, diversifying into new energy and economic sectors. Increasing production now reduces the risk of stranded assets later. OPEC was built for Saudi Arabia's strategy, not the Emirates'. The United States strongly supports the Emirates' move. Washington has always opposed OPEC's pricing power. Trump in particular has pushed for higher output and lower prices, but there's a trade-off. A weaker OPEC means Saudi Arabia has more control, but over a less effective organization. And it gives countries like Russia more leverage in maintaining any coordination that remains. More broadly, this shift aligns the Emirates more tightly with the US and Israel, especially in defense, intelligence, and technology. Saudi Arabia is taking a more balanced approach. They still rely on US security, but they also want to position themselves as the region's central power. That means maintaining ties with China. It means deeper cooperation with Pakistan, including military deployments, and it likely means a gradual shift toward Chinese technology, partly because it's cheaper and more scalable for their population. The idea is that sustained economic pressure will force Iran to concede. But there are problems. The blockade isn't airtight. Iran is still exporting oil. Millions of barrels are getting through, especially to China. And historically, Iran has shown it can endure sanctions. The burden falls on civilians, not the regime, which raises a key question. Will economic pressure actually change behavior? So far, there's little evidence it will. That suggests a prolonged stalemate, continued disruption in the Strait, ongoing negotiations, and rising geopolitical tension. Put it all together, and the Emirates leaving OPEC is just the signal, not the story. The real story is this: the Gulf is fragmenting. Saudi Arabia and the Emirates are no longer aligned on how to handle Iran, how to structure their economies, who their key partners are. And that fragmentation has second-order effects. OPEC weakens, regional alliances shift, global energy markets become less predictable, and critically, the Gulf Cooperation Council, the broader regional bloc, may be next. This isn't a temporary disagreement. It's a structural divergence, and it's happening in the middle of an active geopolitical conflict, which means the consequences won't stay contained. They'll ripple outward into energy markets, global trade, and great power competition. If you want to understand where global energy, geopolitics, and power structures are heading next, this is one of the most important shifts to watch. Because the Middle East isn't just changing, it's reorganizing.